You're listening to ABC Southeast Breakfast. Now, what do you think of when it comes to showing art? A white-walled gallery with people wearing turtlenecks, sipping champagne and stroking their chins? What about street art? Who do you imagine when you imagine the street artist, and what role do you think street art plays in our cultural life? Is it petty vandalism or provocative public statements? Someone that knows a thing or two about street art is Braidwood-based artist Bohie. She joins me on the phone now. Good morning, Bohie.
Good morning, Paul. How are you going?
I'm going really well. All the better for speaking to you on this grey morning. So,
I love the questions.
petty vandalism or provocative public statement?
Turtlenecks as well. It's full spectrum.
Well, I grew up in a very, I wouldn't say culturally devoid, but, a very kind of staid, white, working class community in country New South Wales. And to me, as a kid, that's what art was to me. It was this kind of thing that, the intelligentsia did in the inner city. And it was, something that wealthy people did. And I wasn't aware of a role that art could play in the public space or across demographics, no matter who you are. So what about for you, Bo? What was it that first drew you to street art or public art?
Well, it's interesting that you talk about your perception of art as a child, because I think I had a really similar one, except my parents were crafts people. So this role, like the transition between from craft to art, for me has been a really big journey. And I think craft is this idea of creating practical, beautiful, practical art that's actually usable and actually kind of serves a purpose. And it doesn't mean that person isn't any less creative. It's just viewed in a completely different way. And they've been quite polarised at times from art schools and stuff like that. So craft was a totally different role. And my mum was a traditional sign writer. My dad was a ceramicist. And then mum got me into painting murals with her when I was about 10 years old.
Wow.
So I had a brush in my hand for a long time.
So you had a family apprenticeship.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's very...
I'm so grateful for her schooling too, because there's no courses. I couldn't learn traditional sign writing any other way.
And I mean, that really is like a traditional craft and art in that sense, isn't it? That it's passed down from one generation to the next.
And it's really beautiful like that. And I think that background for me, and keep in mind, street art generally has a graffiti background, right?
Yes.
Most of the guys that are into it grew up on spray cans in, however they got into
train
it.
yards.
Yeah, less of an art school approach and certainly less of a traditional craftsperson approach. So for me, it's been about integrity of the artwork and can it last 100 years or can it speak to a really broad audience, which I don't think that I don't think that a lot of others are really thinking about, especially with art. And with graffiti, it goes across the board.
And so, Bo, I love the idea, and I love my perceived role that public art plays in the space, especially coming from that background with myself where I felt like it was something that, you had to be a certain person with a certain income and a certain cultural background to be able to appreciate. But the good thing about public art is, you could be driving along the freeway at 100 kilometres an hour and catch a glimpse of something that someone's done. And that can have an impact on you. All you have to be doing is being out in a public space to experience public art. So, what role do you think that public art has in driving conversations within our society?
Well, it's the ultimate. It's an interruption to advertising. It's a total interruption to advertising. I think that's what really drew me to hand-painted signs as well. It's really... you look around and it's just logo after logo of vinyl signs or peeled graphics. Now, there was a huge resurgence in the 90s and 2000s for digital and signage and plastic, and that's all really quickly starting to wear and tear. And something handcrafted, something with integrity that's actually been really well considered, especially, bigger projects that have community consultation or when there's opportunity to really work within that space to create something meaningful, create something impactful that's relevant to that space. That's just it's like a shot of adrenaline when you see something like that, isn't it? It's just like a whoa, that surprised me. That brings wonder and awe, I think, to an audience, which is a really exciting thing. And I love that it can also challenge your own perceptions. That the art in the public space, you might not have the choice whether or not you're going to consume that art. If you're the curator of your own culture or your own cultural experience, you can read the books that you like to read, you can listen to the music that you like to read, see the art you like to see. But when it comes to the public space, you may see an opinion that is quite different from yours and challenging to your own. Exactly. And it's not just what we're choosing to consume now. It's like algorithms, you know, like we're literally being sort of fed what other things or other people think that are like what we want to see. So that I think that funnel is becoming narrower and narrower, which is a really interesting, just a really interesting time that we're living in right now. And as you mentioned, like you're not walking into a gallery, and I think that there's been like a really interesting background to fine art galleries where a lot of people, probably the majority of the population, don't feel like that's a space that they want to be in. I certainly haven't felt that. Like I don't have a desire to have, or I haven't in the past had a desire to have my work on blank white walls where you have to walk through a threshold and be kind of awkwardly standing in this big space, like intensely staring at this art. Like it's a lot of pressure. And I think the public space is raw, it's gritty. As an artist, I'm working on different surfaces every time, different scales, in different communities. Like I'm very aware of who might be walking past that space or who I might be speaking to within that. So it's a really challenging job of, you know, passion.
I think that's another fascinating aspect of public art that I'd like you to perhaps explore, Bohie, is that, you know, often artists are kind of locked away privately in their studios creating art, but as a public artist, you're out there, you're on full display for everyone. And I mean, so then how does that inform your process as an artist?
Oh, lots of anxiety. Lots of retreating back to my bush block to just recover. It is an incredibly vulnerable experience. Like, you know, I'm working quite intensely with whoever's behind that project. So for me personally, I really enjoy working with community groups. So if they're not involved in the project already, I'll find people generally to bring in and sort of collect responses from them. I'll have conversations with them about what's important to them and why, and try to create something either literally with them, like painting it together, or on behalf of them, sort of. So it's my collaboration with them. And then it goes over to the public. Then it's out in the public space, and that really intimate, intense design and a really intense installation. Like you can imagine, especially with working with community, we might only have 3 days to paint like all four sides of a massive sporting pavilion or something. Like we have these really short, sharp windows to execute something that I want to be absolutely exceptional. Like I want to be like impactful on those people and on the broader community at large. And that is a lot of pressure. And thankfully the feedback's been great so far, but certainly it's an incredibly vulnerable career path.
Now, Bohie, I feel like we could talk for a lot longer than the time we've got available. And unfortunately, the clock's pushing up very rapidly to 8 a.m. for us here on ABC Southeast. If someone was listening and they wanted to connect with you or to perhaps view some of your work, what would be the best way for them to go about that?
Thanks, Paul. My website's a great start. My name's spelled Bohie, not like David Bowie. And it's just bohie.com.au. And anyone in the South East Coast area, like I live in Braidwood, I would so welcome anyone to reach out and have a chat with me about potential projects down there, because I'm really interested to know how everyone's going after the bushfires. I know the COVID and the bushfires have been such a hard time, so I'd really love to have a chat and see how everyone's going, and hopefully plan some projects that can help.
That sounds like an amazing opportunity for us here on the south, in the southeast, Bohie. Thank you so much for your time. I know you're a very busy artist, and you're a part of the Surfers Festival at the moment. And we'll chat again in the future, Bohie.
Thank you so much.
My absolute pleasure. Street artist based in Braidwood, Bohie.